He was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, deeply moved, again came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So he took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Write this down as one of the points. Jesus knows your pain. Jesus knows your pain. A little over a year and a half ago, received one of the scariest phone calls in my life. It actually led to a great season of pain. A few months before this phone call, my dad's lymphoma had returned after being in remission for an extended period of time. And so he was over at a hospital in Seattle undergoing a stem cell transplant. And the transplant itself, the procedure had gone great, picture perfect. And the doctors really were just in the spot of waiting until his white blood count would just climb a little bit higher to feel good about releasing him and being ready to go home. And then the phone rang. On the other end of the phone was my stepmom. And her voice was very quiet. She said, "Shane, something's gone wrong. Your dad's liver has undergone or experienced extreme damage from the chemo before the transplant. And doctors don't know if he's going to make it." So we were back and forth from here to Seattle twice during that time. And during the second trip over, I can picture like I'm there now. We were sitting in my dad's hospital room. And the doctors and specialists, all these people were gathered with us, with our family. They sat down and proceeded to tell us that there was nothing more they could do for my dad. They had done everything they could, medically speaking, and they said, "That's it. There's nothing else we could do. We can make him comfortable." And that's it. I remember in the couple days following that conversation in that hospital room, I prayed harder and more intensely than I ever have any moment in my life. I remember praying, just crying out to God, "God, if you would heal my dad, you would get so much glory," because the doctors have given up. They said there's nothing else they can do. All the machines are disconnected, turned off. God, if you would heal him now, so many people who know you and people that don't know you would see your power displayed. God, please, please heal my dad. And then on July 6th, 2012, about 3 o'clock in the morning, my dad died. In the days and the weeks following his death, just in the mixture, overflow of emotion, I remember crying out to God, saying, "God, why didn't you heal my dad? I told you, you would have gotten so much glory, so much of our family doesn't know you yet, and that would have been an amazing display of your love and your grace and your power if you would have healed him." But God, now he doesn't get to see the home that my wife and I just bought, our first family home together. He doesn't get to walk in it. He doesn't get to see pictures of it. He doesn't get to meet and hold and spoil his granddaughter, who my wife was pregnant with at the time. He's not going to be there to walk his daughter down the aisle on her wedding day, God. He's not going to see his youngest son graduate high school and grow into manhood. And similar to Mary in this passage, my response to God was, "Lord, if you had been here, Lord, if you would have healed my dad. I think all of us at some point in our lives have either thought, said, prayed, or even yelled that at God. Lord, if you had been here. God, if you would have kept that person from dying. God, if you would have kept that person from leaving me. God, if you would have just made that job or made the finances work out, God, things would be different. God. And the danger is that if we don't look at the rest of the story, we can easily stay in our frustration, our anger, and our resentment towards God. We got to see how Jesus responds to Mary and how he's moved with emotion, not just Mary, but everyone there who's mourning the death of Lazarus. If you read verse 33 in your notes, you can see it there. It says that when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him. And he was deeply troubled. Why was Jesus troubled and angry? I didn't understand that at all until I experienced death and loss and grief myself. You see, right after my dad died, I was looking at God like he was in opposition to me. Like we were in opposite corners of a boxing ring, squaring off each other. And I was in my prayers begging God, pleading with him to come to my side and give me what I wanted. God, heal my dad. And I saw that Jesus was troubled and angry at the death of Lazarus. Why? And God spoke and he revealed himself through this story in my life, through my grief, and I believe he can do the same for you. See, the truth of the matter is this. Jesus is God. He displays that, as Richie's going to talk about, as he calls Lazarus out of the grave. And as God, it says in Colossians 1:16 that everything that has been made and created was made through Jesus, created through him, by him, for him. And his creation is perfect. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't make junk, okay? Some of us need to just preach that to ourselves. God does not make junk. But when sin entered the world, his perfect creation was then corrupted. And that sin led to death. God did not create death. And it pains him, it hurts his heart just as much, if not more, than it does ours when we experience it. So when he's angry, when he's deeply troubled, when he actually weeps, it's because it's a reminder that his perfect creation has been corrupted by sin, which leads to death. So here's what I want you to hear today, is that God is not in opposition to you. He's not standing at a distance. He's in the midst of your circumstance, in the midst of real life with you. Not only that, but he is on your side. And when you experience pain, his heart breaks when your heart breaks. And he weeps with you. And that, to me, is the most comforting thing beyond any answers that I could get to my questions. Just the matter of the truth that God is with us. Write that down. God is with you. Write that down. Capture it in your heart and learn to preach it to yourself. God is with you. Let that promise be the comfort that you need in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your trial.
The story really takes an interesting turn right here. It's Jesus in the pain, in the suffering, in the grief, with everybody. Weeping, as Shane just described, with those. In this place of anger, in this place of hurt, and in this place of pain, we see Jesus in a real candid moment, probably one of the most candid moments recorded in Scripture right here. So comforting to know that God is with us. But then look at verse 38 in your notes. Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. I think this is so interesting that Jesus, kind of in the weeping, in the wailing, in the grief, in the loss, he's still walking towards the tomb. And his heart posture is in this place where the story kind of turns. You got to understand that we started this conversation with this, that Jesus can and wants to and will bring resurrection through our pain. And Jesus has an end in mind. He said it at the beginning of John 11. He said, hey, this isn't going to end in death. God is going to be glorified. In fact, the Son of Man is going to be glorified through this. And Jesus is a very intentional leader, and he's leading the way, and he's heading towards the tomb. And you see his heart in this spot still where he arrives at this tomb very angry. And the story starts to turn here because Jesus starts talking to the people, and he takes a different tone. If you read with me, roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. He walks towards the grave, he walks toward this cave, he walks to this place, still with this anger in his heart, and he says to them, and not in a suggestion, not in a question, not in a good idea or proposal, he says, roll the stone away. There's an authority to what Jesus is calling these people to right here. And you can feel, just in this story, you can feel in Martha and Mary, you can feel the angst, the uncertainty, the lack of faith. When they say, well, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible, right? Yeah. What are you doing? We keep the rock over there to keep the smell in there. We bury people. They're dead. They don't come back. And Jesus is saying, roll the stone away. And I think many of us, if we can kind of just remember back to the beginning of this conversation, that we have a way that we navigate pain. We have a way that we go through life and we go through these hurts and this turmoil and this fight that we just had with our spouse. There's a way that we do this. We go to our different rooms and we pout for a while, and then we think that some time away from each other will help us kind of get cooled down, and then we'll come back and make amends and do all this. And meanwhile, the distance grows in our marriage, and then we just kind of become roommates again, and this is our navigation process. And in the middle of this pain, Jesus walks in with authority, and he says to us, whatever the suffering is that you've got, he's saying to us, move the stone. Write this down. Jesus will call you to move the stone. Yeah. He's going to call you out of your comfort and out of the normal and out of the kind of the niceness of your little grave that we've kind of created for ourselves. And here's what I mean. We don't like death. We don't like pain. We don't like suffering. But we get used to where we are. And we just kind of settle in. And here's what I see happens in a lot of our hearts. Really not any kind of faith engaged at all. And here's how I know. Listen to our hearts. Listen from what comes out of your mouth. Jesus said, out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. So what's coming out of our mouth most of the time is all we can see, feel, hear, and know right now. We have no idea or no perception, no picture of what could be. Jesus is completely focused with the end in mind. He says, move the stone, because the dead man's going to come alive in just a second and the stone's in his way. But we don't see that. It's awkward, Jesus. You just asked us to open up this stone and it stinks in there and he's dead still. We don't like that, but Jesus can see what could be at work in this story. He could see the potential of God's glory in our lives. And I think many of us, we've just kind of settled into our comfort, in our pain, and in our hurt, and in our turmoil, in our addiction, whatever, and we've just kind of resigned ourselves to this is the way it's going to be. Death, decay, ruin, addiction. Well, I'm just a single parent. I'm just a divorced person. I'm just the guy that lost his spouse, or I'm just the person that lost their loved one. I'm just this, and we've just settled in, and this has become our identity. We're dead. We're in the cave. We got the stone rolled up, and Jesus is wanting to speak faith into our lives. The potential of what could be. The resurrection that he has in mind for us is just a few steps of faith away. But many of us, because we're so just used to it, we just settle in. And I believe Jesus will call us to move the stone. And some of you, you're thinking back to moments right now where Jesus has called you to it and you've been too afraid. That's awkward. That's weird. What if I start talking about the potential of what God could do in this circumstance or through this situation? I might look dumb. Because it might happen. The guy's still dead in the grave. And what if it doesn't go that way? And so I hesitate and I kind of go back into the cave and just kind of stay in that place of darkness and isolation. And guess what else? It's a huge risk to share what could be. Because people, you don't trust them. We don't trust them, do we? We don't trust each other. Because they might, ridicule me. They might judge me. They might think, well, that's kind of silly that you're thinking about the future right now when this is how bad your life is. Don't talk about what could be when you look at how bad it is. And there's so many critics, right, all around us. Everybody's telling us how bad it is. We need some people that got some faith around us in our lives, and we becoming people. I believe that God's calling us to become people that can see and start to look towards what could be. And the trouble is, it's so foggy. I can't see. I can't feel what that would be like to have that resurrection. Martha, Lord, it's going to stink terribly. But I believe that Jesus still calls us to this place of faith. And I think that this is the tipping point for many of us right here. Without faith, the Bible says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And we get to this spot where we're just stuck without any faith, any idea what could be, and our identity becomes this kind of dead, decaying person. I love what Jesus does. Look at the rest of the story with me. He kind of rebukes Martha when she's protesting. Look, it's going to stink. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? Yeah. He reminds her of the faith that he's calling her to have. And I believe that God is reminding us today of the faith that he's calling us to have, even in the pain. He's not ignoring the pain. He is weeping with you in your pain. That's good. He has not walked away from you. He's not in opposition to you. Like Shane talked about, he's not on the other side of it, kind of shaming you or guilting you because you're in pain. But he's calling you out. He's saying, move the stone. There's potential. There's resurrection that I have in mind. And I think many of us, we've given up all hope. There's no resurrection possible in my life. But I believe that Jesus, and you want to write this down, Jesus will call you out of this cave. And I believe that there is resurrection possible in every single one of our stories. This is not the end. This is not how it all goes down. Your identity is not that pain. Your identity is not the hurt, the abuse, the divorce, the death, the loss, the grief, the shame. That is not your identity. But many of us, because we become so used to the cave and the darkness and the stone rolled in front of us, and we just kind of settled in that this is the way it is. But it's not your identity. Jesus has plans, purposes for your life. He has called you to so much more. And I think many of us, we just lack that faith and that heart and that inspiration to go, what could be, God? How could you get glory from this situation? And I think one of the toughest things to do is to be optimistic in the midst of our pain. And here's why. Many times, because all we're looking at is ourselves. There's nothing to look forward to in and of yourself. Jesus and Jesus alone has the ability to bring resurrection through this pain that you're experiencing. He's the only one. And for you to try to put your hope in yourself, to put your hope in how strong you can be and how great you could be or how much better you can make this life, you will miss out on the joy that Jesus has in the resurrection that he has planned for your life. Yeah. I remember when Shane was walking through this just a year and a half ago. I remember just a few months later, he was leading us as a church through communion. We were still at the school together. And I remember watching him transition in his heart where he's just like, for the last several months, the last 3 or 4 months after he had lost his dad, I'd become the guy that lost his dad this summer. And Jesus was calling him out of that cave. Jesus was calling him out. And I remember just watching this transition happen in his heart, like there is life after this loss. There is life after this grief and after this pain. Will I always have it? Yes. Will it define me? Is it my identity? No. And many of us, because of the cave and just our comfort with how we've just settled in there, it just kind of worn this as an identity. And I believe that the pain is real. And Jesus does not deny the pain, but I believe he wants to bring resurrection and his potential and his power and his purposes and his glory through this pain that you're experiencing.
Yeah, that's good.
And I just want you to know this, that there are so many people that you know that are locked in the cave. And they got no idea about the potential of what God could do in them and through them. They have no idea. And as maybe kind of like questioning as Martha was, guess what? Somebody moved the stone. Somebody moved the stone away. There was people that cared enough about Lazarus that were submitted enough to Jesus' leadership to move the stone, to roll it out of the way. When he had said these things, he cried out. Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Come out of that cave. That is not who you are. That death will not hold you down. There is no longer this pain and this thing that's going to define you. Come out. And this began this process of a whole new life, this resurrection that Lazarus and none of these people had ever known, had ever seen. This is a revelation of who Jesus is that he just said last time we were talking. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. If anyone believes in me, he will not see death. And those that, though you die, you will live again. In this eternal perspective God brings right here and right now. And he gives us this glimpse in this story of eternity. There is resurrection in every single one of our stories that God is bringing. He is bringing us out of the old life, out of the cave, out of the death, out of the decay, and bringing us to a place that glorifies him. And the thing that I want so much for us is to be a church that prays, that looks to, that thinks about, that calls each other to what could be.
Yeah.
The potential with God at work in our lives. Everybody knows how bad it is. We don't need to talk about that anymore. It's hard. It's painful. It's depressing, right? I'm not saying we ignore the pain. It's real. We're transparent with that. But man, I need some people around me that are talking about what could be with Jesus at work in our lives. I need some people that can actually see potential with faith and excitement of God's leadership in our lives. And I know you do too. And so do your friends, and so do your family. And we got to become these people that God is calling out of the cave. And be willing to step out in faith, risk the embarrassment. What if I move the stone and I start talking about the potential of God's leadership in my life and I'm not sure how it's going to go down? And what if it stinks? And what if I say the wrong thing? And what if people judge me? They probably will. All that stuff's going to happen. But I believe that Jesus' glory far outweighs all that risk. And he wants to work his glory out in your life and in my life. And I believe that the potential what God could do in us and through us, the resurrection that he wants to work out through this pain is worth every risk that God's calling us to take. The thing that just blows me away at the end of this story here, I want you to just hang with me in this piece. The man who had died came out. Lazarus literally walked out. His hands and his feet were bound with linen strips, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. The dude was a mummy, right? I mean, they wrapped him up. He's dead. Many of us, if you just look at your life and coming out of this cave, we've got these like trappings of the old us, the old life, the dead, dying, decaying us. It's just all wrapped up around us. It's like the addiction to porn, man, that you just kind of been hanging on to. Or ladies, it's this idea that the right man is going to define you and complete you. And there's this propensity to have the old us that just kind of hangs on. But here's what I love. There was people there in Lazarus' life that loved him enough to unbind him and let him go. Yeah. And I think so many of us are isolated because we're in this cave all by ourselves. And there's nobody there to walk with us and to begin to pull these death cloths off of us. The mummified old us needs to go away. Yeah. Jesus has resurrection in mind, and the process is beginning right now. As we submit our lives to him, as we say yes to his leadership, we're coming out of this cave. Resurrection is beginning to ignite in our hearts, and the potential of what could be with God at work in our lives is happening. But without the loved ones around you, without other brothers and sisters sitting near you or connected in your group with you to continue to kind of unbind you and to let you free from those grave clothes, you're stuck. And we need, as a church, to be together on this. We're all walking out of these grave clothes together. We're all walking out of the past, out of the death, and out of the decay. We need each other. We need each other to pray about and to think about, the vision cast to each other, the potential of what could be with God at work in our lives. And we need each other to do the hard, dirty work of pulling off the grave clothes.
Yeah.
You got to trust people. I know you've been hurt. I know you've been burned. I know they've rejected you and judged you. But I'm just asking this. Most of the people sitting in this room got the Spirit of God living inside them. They're not perfect, but because of God's Spirit inside of us, He is making us perfect. We're becoming the men and women that He's calling us to be. None of us do this exactly the way we need to. Our connect groups are not perfect, but I'm asking you to just begin to trust that God can use people in your life as well. You isolated is the worst you. It's the most insecure you, the most bound up, limited, no potential you. You got to be in relationship with real people that can walk with you, that can pull these burial cloths off. Jesus has given us a church full of people, a family. Let's learn how to walk this out together. I want to challenge you, encourage you to take the step with all of us today to move that stone, to begin to speak in faith of what could be with God at work in your life, and to begin to walk out of that cave. Jesus is calling us out. Walk out of that cave today. Whether it's for the first time, those of you in the room that you hear Jesus calling your name, Jesus said in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. If you've been dead, spiritually broken, bankrupt, without Jesus at work in your life, He is calling you out today, saying, I want to bring resurrection into your brokenness, into your pain, into your misery, into the life that you've destroyed. I want to work in that life, in that mess. I want to walk in the middle of your real life. I'll weep with you, but I'm calling you out. I'm praying that we would have the courage to respond. If you're here today and you want to give your heart to Jesus, I want to just ask you to respond to Jesus calling you out of the grave today. If you're here today and you're saying, man, I need to come out of the grave. I want to respond to Jesus' leadership. Just put your hand in the air right now. That's awesome. Look at all of you. So awesome. Church, let's just pray right now. Jesus, you're calling us out. God, death is not your plan. Jesus, resurrection is a proof of your power and your love in our lives. And here we are, God, coming out of the grave, out of the cave, out of the dead, dying, decaying old us, God. We call to you, God. You and you alone have the power to bring resurrection into our lives. God, redeem and rescue us from the brokenness of our past, God. Bring your healing, bring your power, bring your freedom, God. For all those in this room that just raised their hand, God, I pray that you would just bring a sense of hope, a sense of potential, a sense of purpose, and a sense of joy like they've never experienced before, God. You would overwhelm them with your love, overwhelm them with your grace, overwhelm them with your freedom, God. I pray that right now, in Jesus' name, they would begin to experience life and life to its fullest, God, because of your Spirit's work in their hearts, Jesus. I pray, God, that everyone in this room would just be compelled, God, to be moved by faith, God, to see what could be in our lives and the lives of those around us. That we not be content in our death and in our burial and in our pain, God, but we would be just full of potential, God, and excitement and faith, God, about what you could do in us and through us, God, because we know that your glory is displayed in the resurrection that you are bringing about in each of our lives, God. Bring your resurrection through this pain. Bring your resurrection, Jesus, in our lives. Bring your resurrection, God, in this city. God, I pray that you would wake hearts up to your love and to your freedom and to your joy, God. God, we celebrate right now, church. Can you just celebrate the salvation that's just happening in this room right now as lives are being called out? Would you stand to your feet with me? Would you stand up? God is calling us as a church to be a people that look at the potential of what God could do. And I'm praying that God would just move our hearts in a place of complete just abandonment of what God could do in us and through us. And I know it's uncomfortable to move the stone, but I believe Jesus wants us and is calling us to move those stones in our lives and to be those people that are moving them off of Lazarus' tomb as well. Who's that Lazarus that you know that's dead? They're stuck. They got a rock in the way. They need you. They need you to walk with them and to start to take these clothes off. The old mummy, the dead them, help them. If you're not connected, get in one of our groups. Put it on that connection card. Don't wait for the perfect time. Make the time. That's the only way it happens for any of us. I'm praying that Jesus would ignite our hearts today. Hey, if you just gave your heart to Jesus and you're ready to get baptized, I think, Shane, would you run down to the back there and help us get organized? And we'd love to just baptize you here in just a few moments. Just walk to the back and meet Shane back there. He'll help you get shorts, and we got shirts and towels and all that stuff.
But let's sing this song that Jesus and Jesus alone is enough for us, for salvation, for resurrection in our lives. Let's sing this, church.